Well, good evening, everyone. It is time for the April 2021 Government Affairs update for the Alaska Airmen Association. My name's Adam White, and it looks like I've got a good signal on both Instagram and Facebook. My head's bouncing back and forth like I'm watching a tennis match, so I apologize for that, but I'm just checking to make sure we've got both streams up and running. It looks like we do. So it's nice to see some names popping up on Instagram as well as on Facebook. So we're going to give folks just a little bit of an opportunity to get logged in this evening. While we're waiting, a friend of mine's airplane's back here behind me. As you can tell, there's no engine. This is why you do inspections, folks. Once again, a friend of mine he was pulling it down for an annual inspection and found a crack in the engine mount, and so here it sits, waiting on a repair for that. So again, perfect example of why we do annual inspections, and one of those things that we were very happy to find before a critical failure there. So anyway, it looks like we got enough folks online to go ahead and just get this thing rolling. First to say hello again and welcome to spring. You can see a glare in my glasses as I'm looking out the window of the hangar here in Nenana, and it's because I have to keep the cell phone properly positioned to be able to get a good signal to the cell tower. But that bright sun on the snow, it is springtime. We are in the upper 40s, above zero, big difference. But upper 40s above zero today. The snow is getting very, very punchy, and ski flying is still pretty good, but especially if you get out there early in the mornings. So you may hear an airplane coming and going. A friend of mine is in the pattern in a 150 doing touch and goes. He just got his license last year, and so he's out doing touch and goes. And what better way to talk about aviation than have airplanes flying around in the background? So hopefully that's not too much of a distraction for us this evening. So again, it's nice to see the big numbers popping up. Hello to a lot of folks that are waving and saying hello to me. I appreciate that. Nice to know that you're there. I have several things to talk about tonight. Some of them may be a little controversial. So I kind of base what I'm going to talk about on these updates from the emails I get through the previous month, the phone calls that I get, some of the conversations I see on social media. Try to deal with some of those issues there. A lot of times I will comment myself on some of those social media threads and give a little bit of insight and background in what the Alaska Airmen Association may be doing on a particular topic. But I save a lot of my commentary for this format. I've learned a long time ago that you have to be careful interacting on social media, because you never really know how it's going to turn out. So, Brenda, I apologize, you can't hear very well. I am having to use an iPad for the Facebook feed, and the iPad microphones are not near as good as the iPhone. So it sounds like Doug can hear us well. So, Brenda, I apologize for that. Maybe just try to get a little bit closer and turn the volume up. But I apologize for that audio quality. So we're going to start off with invasive species. We are coming back into the time of year where folks are going to be going on floats here pretty soon, and things we need to be concerned about with invasive species don't just happen on floats, but that seems to be the time that we are most, I guess, cognizant and aware of it. We've had some problems here in the state with the lodia, which is an aquatic weed. It's an invasive species. It's just really nasty. It'll foul up your water rudders pretty bad. And then it's pretty easy to transport from one body of water to another. And so we've been fighting that issue for several years. Folks seem to have gotten into their normal routine to check for that, to cycle their water rudders as soon as they take off, to be able to dump whatever weeds they may have picked up back into the same body of water. But here's where we're going to have some problems, because now we have to worry about the potential for zebra mussels. And before we sound the alarm too loud and too crazy, I don't want to sound like somebody hollering fire in a crowded theater, but zebra mussels have been found in the state of Alaska. So far, they have only been found in aquariums. But if we remember, that's how Alodia came into the state, was because of aquariums. And people with fish not being careful, thinking that they were doing something good by taking their pet goldfish and dumping them into the slough to let him go. They dumped the aquatic weeds in there as well, and they took off. We're very concerned that zebra mussels will be entered into the state, into the wild, that same method and that same route. So we are trying to get the message out for everybody. Please, please be cautious and be aware. Zebra mussel was found in some aquatic moss and in some stores in Anchorage. State Fish and Game has been trying to track that down and work that issue, but they have issued the warning that zebra mussels are in the state. Now you think, okay, what's the big deal about zebra mussels? Search anywhere on the internet and type in zebra mussels and look for pictures, and you'll see why this is going to be a major problem if zebra mussels get into the wild here in Alaska. They will completely plug up drainage systems. They will completely plug up docks, and they'll attach themselves to the bottom of your floats, and it's crazy. It's just amazing how fast those things propagate. They will get into the water in your float holds, and when you go to pump it out at the next lake, now you have just infested that body of water as well. So look for some more information about zebra mussels. I encourage you to do some research on your own, find out what's going on with that. The Seaplane Pilots Association has got some pretty good resources on their website about zebra mussels. The problem comes when they do get out into the wild and we try to stop the spread. We could have serious complications, even to the point of having to take off and then land at a checkpoint lake and be inspected before you can continue on to other bodies of water. That is what's happening in the lower 48 to try to slow the spread of zebra mussels. We do not want zebra mussels to get out into the wild here in Alaska. So pay attention. Keep your eye on the news, and keep an eye here from what we tell you and what we present for you, and be able to keep an eye on that as well. So with that, with Flying with Floats, again, just a quick reminder, when you take off, as soon as practicable, go ahead and cycle those water rudders, dump whatever weeds that you may have picked up. That's not going to help the zebra mussels if we get those, but at least for the weeds, that does help. So next item on the list, there's still a lot of conversation from folks wanting to fly to Alaska this summer. And back to Doug's question, is there an antidote we can put on our floats to kill the zebra mussels? There is some things that can be done with that, but it's pretty hard to do. And aluminum being what it is, you have to be careful. Sometimes the cure is worse than, the treatment's worse than the cure. But that is some things that, heat actually is one of the big things that kills them. So a lot of steam cleaning is what happens in the lower 48 to get rid of those mussels. So back to the thing of folks flying up from Canada. I don't know the short answer. Other than if you're not an Alaska resident, and if you are flying up here for recreation and vacation, you are going to have a hard time convincing the Canadian authorities that you are essential to travel through Canada. So you got to figure out how you want to do this. I've seen some threads online of groups of people wanting to get together and tour and come up the Alaska Highway, flying to Alaska to then tour around once you get to the state. Boy, I wish you luck, but I just don't see how the Canadian authorities are going to let you come in and do that if you're honest with them about what you're doing. And that's not to say that it's good to lie, because you do not want to lie to Customs and Border Protection and immigration. I think that goes without saying. So with that, a lot of folks are trying to take the coastal route, and that's a viable option. It really, really is a viable option. I've flown that route back in December. On the way to the lower 48, I need to go back down and pick up our Cessna 206 after an engine and prop change and some instrument upgrades. And my plan is to fly back up the Inside Passage, weather permitting, and you have to look for a good weather window. It's much easier to do that route and be able to convince Customs and Border Protection that your travel is essential, especially being an Alaska resident, and that's for my other employment. They own the airplane. Being an employee of that other organization, it does make it easier to talk about that coming through. If you plan to do that nonstop from like Bellingham to Ketchikan, you need to do your homework. You need to look and see how far that is. As for that phone call coming in, I thought I had that muted. But be able to go through and then make sure you got enough reserve to get through and do that. You're not going to be able to do something that you haven't told the Canadian authorities about. And so a 650 nautical mile range is pretty much minimum to do that trip nonstop from Bellingham to Ketchikan. But then you've got to be able to land once you get into Ketchikan, and we all know that weather sometimes is not always the best option to be able to do that, and so reserves and alternates and all of that. So if you want to know some more information about that, if you want to talk some more about that, I encourage you to reach out to me via Facebook or via just a regular email. And it looks like we may be having a problem with the Facebook feed, but it shows that I'm still live there, so I apologize if that has gone down, but I am still getting interactions there, so Doug, maybe that connection might be on your end. I'm not sure. Sorry about that. Next item on the agenda would be TFRs. If you've looked at and checked NOTAMs lately, you know that there's a TFR south of where I'm standing right now, down at the Clear Air Force Station. R2206 now has a TFR around that. What we're running into is it is not charted correctly on ForeFlight, Garmin Pilot, FlyQ. SkyVector's not even showing it right now, and they've had some issues with trying to interpret that NOTAM and get it presented. Everywhere I've looked, that TFR is not depicted correctly, and that digging deeper, we're finding out that most of the time TFRs do have problems being shown on a flight bag, electronic flight bag, whether it's an iPad or some other device. You need to read the NOTAM. You need to read it to make sure what the boundaries are, and especially with this NOTAM here over R2206, you need to read it because it is not 24 hours a day, even though that's what it's being depicted as on your iPad. It is only from 3:59 p.m., basically 4 o'clock in the afternoon, to 8 a.m. the following morning, 7 days a week. So during the day, that TFR is not there, but yet is still being depicted on all of our electronic flight bags. So all the more reason to know that NOTAMs are the primary reference. They are the go-to information. What I've also run into is talking with ATC. They are somewhat confused, at least the reports I've been getting back from other folks. The ATC is a little bit confused about the activation and status of that TFR. So read the NOTAMs. And if you're seeing a problem with the depiction of that TFR based off of the NOTAMs, do me a favor. I need you to send an email to whoever it is that you're using, whether it's ForeFlight, whether it's Garmin Pilot, any of the others. Send them an email to their tech support and let them know. The more people that tell them about this, the better chance we're going to have to get it fixed. I've reached out to several of them already, and they're saying, yeah, well, you know, that's up in Alaska. We'll get to it maybe. And so if this is an important issue for you, please, please, please make the effort to go and send those folks a message. And you can do that through the help feature of whatever app it is that you're using to let them know if you see any errors in the way that TFR is being depicted. Speaking of TFRs, if you remember, we've had some TFRs pop up in the past few years in the Gulkana area because of the HARP site that used to be controlled by the military, but now the University of Alaska is managing that facility. And so because of that, they have to issue TFRs when they go and do some of that research and testing. So I've been informed that we can expect a couple of TFRs here in May and June as they do a series of experiments down there. And so be looking for a TFR to show up in the Golconda area sometime mid-May and then again sometime in mid-June. There is a possibility that because of the testing that they're doing there and experiments that they're doing, they just got a very large grant and they're going to be increasing their schedule for experiments. So there is a possibility that we may see a proposal for a restricted area to pop up over that HARP site. So look for more information about that as it becomes known and available, and we'll see what we can do for you as far as keeping you informed and educated. Speaking of comment periods, the comment period for the R2206 expansion, which basically is going to mirror the TFR, we're coming up on a deadline for that here in another week. And so if you have not commented yet, if you have made some comments on social media about that TFR and about the expansion of that restricted area, I need you, hear me clearly, I need you to write a comment and send it officially. Talking about it on social media is not an official comment that the military or the FAA will do anything about. Matter of fact, they probably don't even know that you said it. So I encourage you, I plead with you, I beg you, if you have had something to say about that TFR or about that expansion of the restricted area on social media, please do me a favor and please submit that information in the form of a formal written comment. You can go and find out how to do that online as you just do a search for R2206 expansion or Clear Air Force Station, LRDR, or send me an email and I will get you routed to the right place to submit that written comment. We need to hear from you. The military needs to hear from you. The FAA needs to hear from you. And again, they don't pay attention to what's said on social media. So I need you to go ahead and submit that written comment. Again, I have written letters on behalf of the Alaska Airmen's Association throughout that entire process. I will be writing another one for this next round that, again, expires here within a week or so. So you need to make sure that your voice is heard, and your voice is not heard if you just say something on social media. So do me a favor and do that. Speaking of social media and things that have had a lot of conversations here lately, is landing on roadways. And some of you may have seen my comments on a post in the Fly Out Alaska group about landing on roadways. And if you're here in Alaska and you've been keeping up with what's going on down in Juneau, there is some legislation that's being talked about in committee about allowing four-wheelers and snow machines to operate on roadways here in Alaska. So here's the problem. A lot of folks are saying now's the time to strike, now's the time to get airplanes added to that list. How come we haven't done anything about this? Used to we could do this without any problems. So here's a little bit of background. There was an Alaska statute that specifically allowed us to land aircraft on roadways in Alaska. Key term is used to be. There is no longer a statute that permits us to do that. That being said, there is also no statute that prohibits it. So it is not illegal. Here's where we run into problems presently. If you are impeding the flow of traffic, if you are blocking traffic, if you doing something, just the fact that your airplane's there and it caused somebody else to have an accident, if you're acting reckless, there's all kinds of things that a trooper or any other law enforcement can come in and say, hey, you caused this guy to lose concentration and he actually swerved and ran off the road when you landed. So there's issues that have happened like that. However, there's been other times in other cases when someone had landed, pulled over to a pull-out, was not impeding the flow of traffic, was just sitting there on the side of the road, way off the lane, way out of the lane, and a trooper asked him, hey, what are you doing? There was a long conversation. There was talk of a ticket being issued and all of those things. So here's the deal. It is not illegal to land on the roadways in Alaska as of today. I've been following that bill in Juneau pretty closely when it comes to operating four-wheelers and snow machines on roadways here in Alaska. This is what I'm seeing talked about and discussed in committee that causes me to be very concerned and to second guess and to think that maybe we don't want to talk about airplanes right now. So there's some of the things that have been coming up is that anything, and I'm just going to quote it here because I don't want to get this wrong, anyone riding on the road would need to be licensed, registered, and insured in the state, officials said. The vehicles would need working lights, brakes, and mufflers. So most airplanes have some form of muffler. Some of us don't have very good ones. But that's where we get your horsepower, right? Got to let it breathe. Brakes, not a problem for the most part. Working lights, what does that mean? Last time I checked, I don't believe I've ever seen turn signals on an airplane. Correct me if I'm wrong. If you found one, somebody that's got turn signals on an airplane, I'd love to see a picture. Or a stoplight, a brake light. Insured. That's probably the thing that would keep this from happening. These others we could probably work with. Being insured, having insurance, if you're going to operate off of a road, that's going to be a problem for a lot of folks here in Alaska because a lot of folks don't carry insurance on their airplanes. They don't carry liability insurance. And we all know that if you drive a vehicle in the state of Alaska, you are required to have liability insurance. So how far do we push this? Do we want to have the issue of requiring liability insurance on all aircraft here in the state? This is why I haven't made such a big deal out of this up to this point. This is why I have been satisfied, and I use that word intentionally. This is why I have been satisfied for the past 14, almost 15 years of doing government legislative affairs for the Alaska Airmen's Association to not have anything specifically allowing it, but being satisfied with nothing specifically prohibiting it. Because when you start getting into the weeds with this stuff, these are the problems that we're going to run into. These are the hurdles that we may not be able to overcome. And sometimes it is best to let sleeping dogs lie and to say that, no, it is not illegal. So we can do this. But again, you've heard me say this an awful lot here on these updates. Just because you can doesn't necessarily mean that you should. Now, there are times that it's appropriate. There are times when it's great to do that. There's been times that that's the best thing to do, and there's times when, I just want to. But then you've got to balance that with, it's the middle of a sunny afternoon in July, and we've got tour buses and RVs everywhere, and I'm going to land in a stretch where there's about a half a mile gap and do all this stuff. Is it wise to do that? Maybe not. So let's be careful. Let's not impede the flow of traffic. Let's not be a distraction. Let's not cause an accident. Let's not do anything that would cause a state trooper or any other law enforcement officer to sit there and think, okay, I got to figure out a way to keep this guy from doing this because he is dangerous. Okay? That's what my concern is. So, again, I'll restate, not just because of my efforts, but because of other people's efforts in conjunction with mine as acting as government legislative affairs for the Alaska Airmen's Association. I consider it a huge success that we have been able to prevent statute from being written that makes it illegal to land on roadways. Okay? And I say that very specifically, and some people say, well, that's semantics. Well, sorry, that's what politics is. Politics is semantics. So I'm going to keep watching this. There's been some folks recommend that I talk to some legislators and other things, and I've started reaching out and talking and having some conversations with staffers about this. But these are the things that we're concerned about because of what we're seeing happening in committee right now, talking about four-wheelers and snow machines. The things that are going to be required for them to do that are onerous, and it is not going to work for aviation. So, again, they need to be licensed, registered, and insured in the state. Licensed, registered, probably going to have an okay issue with that because we're registered with the FAA, although some states make you register with the state, and that's been talked about by DOT, and with that comes fees. Is that what we want? when now we're satisfied with it not being illegal and we don't have all those other things added on to us. So hopefully that makes sense. Hopefully I haven't rambled on too much about that. If you want to talk some more about that, if you disagree with me on that statement, if you want to know some more about some of the finer details and the finer points of all this stuff, I would love to talk to you about it. But just so you know, I'm going to severely limit myself and resist the urge to get into a big discussion on social media about these things, because those rarely end well. And I'd like to keep it civil, and I'd like to keep all of you as my friends. So, okay. We can talk about this at the gathering in Palmer, Mother's Day weekend. I'd love to sit down and have a conversation with you about this stuff there as well. But speaking of insurance, I've had several emails in the past month, again, with folks coming to me and asking. I've had phone calls saying, Adam, I'm having trouble getting insurance. My broker says that they are not going to renew my policy. Some folks are saying it's because they've hit a magic birthday. And other folks are saying that they've upgraded aircraft to a more complex or a more high-performance aircraft, or they're talking about doing some operations that the insurance underwriters consider dangerous, and they are not, they're being denied coverage. Actually, over 70 is becoming more of a problem, and high-risk operations and high-performance complex aircraft are big issues. Talking with a gentleman in the past week, 2 weeks. If you fly in and out of Canada, he does that for business. It's essential, so he's been able to do some of that, but expanding in some other areas. And Canada requires you to carry insurance. He can't get insurance, so how does he do this? What is he going to do to be able to keep his business going, to be able to do these things? So it's not just aviation, by the way. If you follow anything in the marine world, there is a major problem in the marine industry right now as well. It's not just aviation when it comes to insurance. A lot of U.S. flagged vessels are being denied renewals, especially operating in different parts of the world if they're a U.S. flagged vessel. Same thing's happening in the marine industry is happening in the aviation industry. The market is incredibly tight. There's been some huge payouts and huge losses with major accidents in the previous couple of years, and we are just at the start of this cycle. You hear me say this every month. It's going to get worse before it gets better. What's my advice? How do we fix this? What do we do about it? The market will correct eventually, but it may not happen until a lot of us have decided that we don't want to be in the market anymore. And so some folks are just not going to renew their policy. They're just not going to be willing to pay the premiums that are going to be charged. So they're going to get out of the market. The other thing that has helped, what has helped me in my insurance, and what I'm hearing from a lot of other people that has helped them with keeping their rates down a little bit, you need to document your recurrent training. You need to document the seminars that you attend, even the virtual ones that you attend. You need to go ahead and seriously consider, and I know a lot of folks for many, many years have kind of just blown off the FAA Wings program. You need to seriously consider participating in the FAA Wings program. You need to document that recurrent training. You need to go fly with a flight instructor and do your instrument proficiency check, even though you don't fly FR very often. You need to go out and do a flight review more often than maybe every 2 years, just so you can document that you have a culture of safety with what you're doing, that you are not the average high-risk pilot, and that you are worth them taking you on as a risk. The other thing that has improved and helped a lot of folks with keeping their rates below the average spike is having a long-term relationship with your broker. And I've seen a lot of people talk about, oh yeah, well, you know, I jumped ship from those guys and went over here to these other folks and they gave me a better deal. And then next year, you hear them talking about, well, you know, they can't give me as good as a deal anymore. I'm trying to go back to my other guy. And you start playing ping pong. You start bouncing around between brokers, and that's actually not good if you want to be able to keep your insurance rates down. Now, I know a lot of brokers, some brokers definitely agree with me on that. There's a couple of brokers out there that have disagreed with that statement. Here's the thing. There's a very small number of underwriters. A broker can go out and question all the underwriters, but if you know your broker, if your broker knows you, when the questions come back from the underwriter, who's going to be better able to answer those questions for you on your behalf? Is it somebody that knows you, or is it somebody that you just met because you called them on the phone and they think they can get you a better quote? Alaska Airmen's Association doesn't necessarily endorse any particular broker or any insurance companies. I'm not giving legal advice. I'm not an insurance broker or an underwriter. People ask me, how do we do this? I'm relaying to you what I know to be true because it's what happens for me. And my experience with keeping insurance on 2 airplanes, both of which operate off airport here in the interior. And so it's not an easy thing to do, but those are the things that I have found that work. My rates did go up, but I will say that they did not quite go up as high as the norm, as the average increase. I know that my rates are going to go up again next year. I've already been given heads up on that, just because everybody's rates are going up from one year to the next. And so with that, I think we've talked enough about insurance. Infrastructure bill in Washington, D.C. If you're keeping up with what's going on in D.C., it's kind of hard to keep up with everything that's going on in D.C. right now. But I will say that this infrastructure bill that's being pushed by President Biden, Representative Young from here in Alaska met with Biden yesterday, is my understanding, talking about this bill. Biden is trying to get Don Young's support for it. I've been trying to read through and find out some more about what's in the bill, what the potential impacts would be for infrastructure here in Alaska. Trying to figure out how much money the FAA might be getting so we can talk about infrastructure here in Alaska once again. And it's kind of hard to see right now because so much of this is very fluid. And nobody really knows. Everybody's speculating with what's happening with that. But there's some potential with this infrastructure bill that Alaska may benefit when it comes to improving our infrastructure. We are a very infrastructure poor state, and the infrastructure that we have is just as aged as a lot of the infrastructure in the lower 48. So we kind of have a double whammy when it comes to that. So stay tuned for more information. So that's the big topics that I had for tonight, and I've been watching the comments and the threads here. I'm not seeing any major questions that I haven't already addressed. Appreciate that comment there on Instagram about staying with the same insurance carrier. Nice to know that folks agree with my comment about that. One thing I do want to remind you is going through and with breakup happening, and just, okay, a question here about the situation in Canada. There's no, it's purely speculation as to when it might improve to be able to come and go through Canada. And it's kind of a week-to-week thing. I do know that there's some pressure right now on the cruise industry, some pressure on Canada about the cruise industry to be able to see if we can open that back up, and that might have some implications for aviation, but I don't know that for sure. It's basically a week-to-week type thing. The Canadian government has said that they don't expect to make any major changes to these policies until maybe next February. I hope that's not the case, but that's what's being talked about. So back to this one issue here about Riverwatch, with breakup being right here on us right now with the rivers and the potential for ice jam flooding and other things. The National Weather Service is once again asking if you are out flying around and you see a river that has some activity that you think they would like to know about, they want to hear about it. File a pilot report and say that you have a Riverwatch pilot report. Take pictures, and when you come back home, do a search on the internet for Alaska Riverwatch, and some information will be there in your search thread, and some contact information so you can email those pictures and talk more about what it is that you're seeing. The forecasters rely heavily on pilots to get an update on the breakup front, where it is, how fast it's moving. from day to day, and the type and style of ice that you're seeing and its activity and behavior. So do us all a favor. We all like to know what the breakup's doing and how that's progressing and the potential for ice jam floods. If you remember, year to year, we have several villages that are hit with ice jam floods because of the rivers and breakup season. Also want to remind you that raffle tickets are selling fast. My understanding is that we are forecasted to sell out of tickets this week. So if you have not bought a ticket, you need to do it quickly. And so you can call the office there in Anchorage during Alaska business hours, and that phone number 907-245-1251. That's 907-245-1251, and buy your raffle tickets for the rebuilt Super Cub. If you haven't seen what's been going on with that, Acme Cub Training in Anchorage has done an incredible job refurbishing and rebuilding a Super Cub there in Anchorage. So there's plenty of places to go look at that on our YouTube channel and on social media with that as well. So again, we are looking forward to seeing as many of you as possible at the Great Alaska Aviation Gathering in Palmer this year at the Alaska State Fairgrounds, May 8th and 9th. And go to our website for more details and more information about that. Exciting that we're going to be able to have an in-person live event this year. Obviously with some major changes and a lot of COVID considerations, the fairgrounds was the best option to be able to give us room to spread out and to try to accommodate some of these things to be aware and cautious of COVID. So let's see, got some comments about some other things I've been talking about, so good to see that. As far as the audio, I apologize for that. We are working through some technical things and talking about better ways to do these live events. And we're contemplating maybe actually going to YouTube and doing them live on YouTube as well as on social media. But they are archived on YouTube. They will be posted up tomorrow on our YouTube channel, and you can go back and watch all the updates that I've done probably since back in the fall of 2019, I think is when I started doing this. Still sporting the Hawaiian shirt just because it's kind of tradition now since COVID. I started doing this, and it's a bright sunshiny day. I was standing outside the hangar talking to a buddy of mine before all this started, standing in the sun, and it felt really good. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and sign off and say goodnight unless anybody's got any other questions, and I'm keeping an eye here. I'm not seeing any pop up here last minute. But again, I appreciate you sticking with me through this long, almost 40-minute update. Try to keep them a little shorter than this, but we had some pretty important things to talk about tonight. And encourage you to attend the Great Alaska Aviation Gathering if you're comfortable doing that with COVID and all. But I will be there, and the plan is to have an update on the government affairs there in person. I would love to talk with you if you've got some concerns or issues or questions or comments about what the Alaska Airmen's Association is doing on your behalf in government and legislative affairs. So with that, I'll sign off and say good night, and we'll see you next time.